Welcome to the Leaders of Lasting Impact podcast. I'm Matt Pohl, your host, and this is Tony Martignetti. He is the Chief Inspiration Officer at Inspired Purpose Partners. That's a bit of a mouthful, Tony. Why don't you start off by just kind of unraveling your role
Yeah,
and what your organization does?
I'm happy to. First of all, thank you so much for having me on, Matt. This is great to be in this space with you. We've connected in the past. I've had you on my show before, which is kind of a
That's
cool
right.
thing.
Yeah.
So first of all, the Inspired Purpose Partners. I got to slow things down. It's been a really hectic day so far. Inspired Purpose Partners is a organization that provides coaching, leadership development, and training for people who are looking for to up level themselves and their teams, especially when they're going through navigating challenging situations. I call it chaotic times, which seems like we're always going through chaotic times.
Yeah.
So that's the service offering we provide. We work with small to mid-size organizations, and sometimes large, but most of the time it's small to mid-size.
Okay.
And just to kind of give you some clarity around my name and my title, Chief Inspiration Officer is not a common title, but it's one of those things where I have to earn that title every day,
Mm.
by finding my connection to inspiration, but also finding ways to inspire others to operate at their best capacity. What I often say is that inspiration is the conduit, it's the catalyst for change, and it's also the catalyst for finding our purpose along our path of creating the impact we want.
Okay. Well, that's cool. Tell me a little bit about your business background and,
Yeah.
kind of what led you here.
Absolutely. So my business background is really a very different background that you'd expect. I had a finance background. I
Okay.
came into the world of business, first of all, I was a pre-med major who switched into business because I realized that I wasn't meant for being a doctor. Even though it sounded glamorous, I realized that cutting people open every day was not going to be my bag.
Okay.
Um,
I definitely fall into that category as well.
yeah. But I did find myself working in companies first in high tech, and then eventually found myself working in biotech. So I did find my way into the sciences. And what I was really passionate about working in the industry is finding the connection to how we're helping patients and understanding the science that goes into things like gene therapy and RNA, mRNA. And this is the early days when I was involved in that industry. But my particular role was in finance and strategy. So I did things like um, FP&A and accounting, and also did some strategy around deals to help bring in new assets and also to sell business units of companies I was working with.
Okay. Yeah,
Uh,
that's cool.
yeah,
So you're in that kind of that corporate environment, it sounds like,
yeah.
then was there a gradual or sudden shift where you said, I'm going to go do my own thing outside of that large organization?
Yeah, and it was gradual and then all of a sudden.
Okay, I heard
So,
that, right?
you know, I think what happens is we tend to build up the ability to adapt into our environment, and we see that okay, we can be able to live in this world that we're in, and it's okay for a while, but then you realize it's all of a sudden that you're not meant for that. And
Mhm.
so what I mean by that, let me give you some clarity, is that throughout my time in biotech, I loved the learnings and all of the ups and downs. But one of the things I realized is that I wasn't meant for numbers. And people would tell me like, "Oh, you've got a really good sense of people. You've got a great sense of the business." Um, and I would always say, "But I need to make sure that I'm the numbers person. I need to be analytical. I need to be this person who can see the numbers more clearly." Um, and more and more, I started to realize that they were telling me something, that I'm not the person who I thought I was.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah. And it started to burn me out. When you start doing things to be someone you're not, then you start realize that you're leaving a whole part of who you are outside of yourself,
Yeah,
or away from, your ability to shine. And
right.
so I started burning out and eventually found myself in a boardroom at a biotech company where I was looking around the room and saying, like, God, I'm not, this is not who I want to be. This is not who I am. And I
Hmm.
decided to get up and walk out. And I decided at that moment that this is not how I want to live my life.
Yeah.
So walking out, I decided I'm going to change this room by leaving this room and deciding on a different path that was going to be aligned with who I am. And I had to figure out who that was.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, we at the Rewild Group, we have a phrase, highest and best, and we use it in the context of helping people understand, and as an organization trying to put employees, the team members into a place where they're adding the highest value to the organization, and we're using the best of who they naturally are. It
Yeah,
sounds like you realize that that really wasn't your highest and best use, that there was something greater and different that you could really bring value to an organization.
absolutely. And I don't want to, kind of paint a picture of I was like, a failure. I was in high regard.
Yeah,
I did great work. And ultimately, I was, rewarded for it, compensated wise and title wise. But ultimately, I realized that that was all not rewarding for me. It was not fulfilling to me.
right, right,
And that on the inside is where I started to feel this disconnect
right,
between outside rewards and internal fulfillment.
right.
Yeah.
Okay. So slowly, all of a sudden, it happened,
Yep.
and then you transitioned into what? What was
Yeah.
that next step for you?
Yeah. Well, the first step was a journey into business coaching, which was more, I say it not because there's anything wrong with business coaching, but because I knew how to look at businesses. I figured, oh, I'll coach businesses, which are made up of people, and I know people, so
Right,
I'll do that. And what I realized quickly is that wasn't deep enough for who I wanted to be. And so
right.
I started to go to, if you think about it, it's clicking down a
Mhm.
notch and said, well, who do I really want to serve and how do I want to serve them? And how can I best bring the best of who I am? And so I had to, and use this is my tagline for my business is inspiration through honest conversation. I had to have an honest conversation with myself about who am I?
Right,
What do I do that makes me come alive? And what I realize is it's about having a holistic conversation with people like leaders to understand both their how do they run a business, but also how do they run their lives? How do they make sure that they're taking care of themselves, not burning out in the process of making an impact?
right.
So that switch came into the sense of like from business coaching to more leadership coaching and executive coaching.
Okay,
And that's where my power started to get unlocked in working with people one on one.
okay. What kind of companies then have you been working with? Is it certain industries, certain sizes, certain geographic areas?
Yeah, I mean, in the early days, it was more around, you know, working with small startup companies in biotech and in high tech, and it eventually has gotten larger over time.
Okay.
But the thing is, it really comes down to that same ethos of like, okay, I find people who are leaders of organizations or rising leaders who have come to this place where they say, you know, something's not working here. Something's not where it needs to be. I'm not
Mhm.
feeling fulfilled, and I want to make an impact. So I have continued to work with people in that place that I get to say the phenotype where they're feeling that sense of like, yeah, something's missing and it could be better.
Yeah.
Um,
Is that the kind of, maybe it's challenge isn't the right word, but kind of a point where you're finding them? You know, I think you've shared a little bit of this, but if you describe what that business leader is feeling, what they're experiencing at that moment that seems to be a red flag that it's like, oh, I can help that person.
Yeah, I mean, it comes through in conversation. You can sense it, even though sometimes you don't hear them say the words exactly. You
Mhm.
can sense it from how they're showing up, how they're talking about the way things are. They may say things like, yeah, I'm running this company and here's where we're at. And, if they don't have like that all around, everything's great feeling in them, or they're seeing themselves knocking it out of the park, they feel like something's missing, and you can tell the way that they talk about themselves and about their business that there's something that they want more of, but they can't have it.
Right.
Um, and it's the more is actually an interesting term because it's not about having more, it's about taking away certain things to be able to have them feel more.
Okay. Right. So it's a growth through elimination a lot of
Yeah,
times as opposed to just adding more. Yeah.
exactly.
Uh, Obviously, you bring a lot of personal experience to the table. Are there methodologies or frameworks or things that you kind of either have developed or you kind of incorporated into how you provide value to your clients?
Yeah, one of the frameworks that I love working with people on, and this is one that has been helpful to me personally, um, is this idea of it's called expand your vision, narrow your focus.
Mm,
And I'll repeat that again just to kind of for clarity. Expand your vision, narrow your focus is about really expanding your possibilities. So I get people to sit down and say, what would be possible if you're able to expand the aperture of what you're seeing right now? If
okay.
you thought bigger about
Okay.
what you want to create, because oftentimes it's not that we don't know what to do; it's just we haven't thought about what's possible
Mm,
yet.
right.
Um, so getting expansive is the first thing, but then realizing that you can't do it all, right?
That's right.
And oftentimes I still get myself in that place where I'm trying to do it all, and I'm like, wait, slow down, buddy. We need to get back into the focus of what is the most important steps I can take. How can I find that leverage point? And so that's where narrowing your focus is so important. Is to say, okay, what is the thing that I want to narrow my focus on now that I've gone expansive and seen new options? Which
Mhm.
ones are going to be the bets that I want to take?
Okay.
Um, and so when I'm working with people, that framework helps them to think expansively and then narrow down and think about what they want to do to be able to get that next move made in their business, in their lives, whatever it may be that they're trying to tackle.
Okay. You find that most of your clients do they tend to be CEO business owner types, or is it further down within the organization, more key leaders?
It's a across the spectrum. I mean, it's not always them just CEOs and business leaders, business owners. I'll also run into people who are running functions like a CMO, a chief medical officer, or a
Okay,
chief development officer, or a CSO, chief scientific officer, or levels down beyond that are a lot of scientists who come into roles that they they know scientifically what to do, but they've never led people. And that gets them kind of stuck in this mode of like, I want to be more effective. I want to do this right. And I'm feeling overwhelmed. I feel kind of disconnected, and it's challenging.
sure.
Oftentimes we don't give people who need these skills all of the tools they need to be successful.
Yeah, no, especially like you said, that technician, especially the scientist, right? That's even further on that side of the spectrum of being intelligent and technical and then having to lead people. That's a big chasm to kind of
Mm.
cross.
Yeah,
Um,
and I said earlier this idea of like, a lot of it's about impact and burnout, higher impact and lower burnout. And they're driven for impact for sure. And if they're trying so hard to manage the people side and also trying to manage the tech side, and they just are not figuring out the formula of how to get those two things right, then it's going to lead to burnout.
Right. Um, what would be a standard kind of cadence or duration of an engagement that you would have with one of these business leaders?
Yeah, I mean it's interesting how like it's you start with like a high dose
Right.
of using the language of biotech or as therapeutics. Your high dose is really going to be at least twice a month where they're getting high exposure and an impact early on to really figure out what's important, what do they want to conquer, get clear on the goals, usually some assessment work, and you do that for about 6 months. And then after about 6 months, it's comes down to, okay, would we want to do like once a month? Do we want to kind of continue at the same cadence as we have? It all depends on where we're at. I want to do a temperature check at that point and see, where do they feel they need to be? I've had clients who've stuck with me for 5 years
Okay.
and longer and still here with me, that have basically gone to just every once in a while we connect and just check in to make sure that I'm holding them accountable, to make sure that they're keeping in line with the things that they wanted to accomplish, and if they're having new challenges they're facing that they want to check in on.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense. Um, our audience always appreciates stories. Now, you're working one on one with individuals, so we should be sensitive to that as far as um, hearing some stories. But it'd be great for you to share a story or two that
Yeah.
of a client that where they were, kind of what was the process and what was the outcome that you've seen.
Yeah. Well, I worked with a client who was in a high tech organization, not a biotech this time, a high tech organization, and she was really struggling to get her team to really come together and have a clarity about what each person's role was, and how they were going to be working together. It was, I think, the key thing of it all was just having a cohesive mission and vision about
Okay.
what they were trying to accomplish. And so her biggest struggle was that communication was not great. And it wasn't just hers, it was the team in general. And so I said, this is going to be something where you can start with creating a different tone of the organization. How can you start with yourself? And as we talked about how what does she want them, what is her vision for the team, and how will they operate, we started to talk about the rules and principles that would kind of create the container for the team. And principles are an interesting concept because people don't think about principles as being something that would be important, but principles are like the leadership principles give people the guardrails as to
Yeah,
how we operate. And so we
absolutely.
started to create these principles that then she worked with the team to actually help them be part of crafting these principles, which then led to them operating through these principles for about a year. And by the end of the year, this team was like they were on fire. They were working well together, and they were seeing themselves as being able to craft updates to those principles as they go along, as things needed to be changed, they would. But they felt like they were more engaged because it wasn't just something that was mandated by the leader.
Mm-hmm.
It was actually something that they were involved with.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah.
Um, that was in the high tech space. What
Yeah.
about an example in maybe the biotech?
Yeah. Well, biotech biotech is definitely deals with a lot of setbacks. And so one of the things that I'm always dealing with with leaders in that space is this idea of communicating the things that are setbacks in terms of clinical trial failures and what have you, especially when there's an impact on the team potentially letting someone go. And so an example of that, so I worked with a company that was working in the oncology space, and I had a leader who really was concerned about how do I break this news. We have a clinical trial that didn't quite read out the way we wanted it to, And how do I make sure that the people on the team feel like their efforts are being, celebrated, but also that we're not just, glossing over this, the
Right.
setback in the
Setback. Yeah.
organization.
Yeah.
So what we did is we talked about this idea of celebrating the learning and not the failure.
Okay.
And so we got together and had a meeting and talked about what did we learn from this and how can we make sure that we're not just brushing past this event and looked at it with more of a celebratory tone. And for the people who were not going to stick with the company, just making sure that we gave them a sense of like, hey, this is something that we're really proud of you for being part of,
Mhm.
and we're leaving on a good note, not you
Right.
know not because you failed or you've done something that is, wasn't done right. So it was really a communication change, and the tone of communication was really important. So
Mm.
you can see at the cornerstone of a lot of these things that I've done, it has a lot to do with communication, but it's about the stance you take in the communication that makes
Right.
a big difference.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, I would say that is a long journey from you being a CFO kind of a type, right?
Yeah.
To doing this kind of work. I can see how becoming aligned with that passion, that natural talent that you have has been a real good move for you. How long have you been doing that? How long is this, you've been doing Inspired Purpose Partners or that kind of work?
Yeah, it's been 6 years, so it's a long but short time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think about the journey I've been on. It's been a lot of trial and error, a lot of ups and downs, as any entrepreneurial endeavor anyone can attest to. The first few years are challenging because you're still figuring it out,
Absolutely.
and then you're still figuring it out as you go along. But because the economic challenges of the outside world continue to put you on your tips of your toes, which is
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, great. Right. Like you said, it keeps you on your toes. It wouldn't be bad just to have a great, robust economy for a few years. So that would be nice also. But no, that's great.
Yeah.
Um, if you were sitting across the table with a business leader who's, maybe struggling with some of the things or has reached that point that you often see business leaders who reach out to you having reached, what's a word of advice, just something that could be helpful to them at that moment?
Yeah. Um, One thing I often say is, what is not being said that should be said?
Mm,
Um, Oftentimes we're afraid to say the things that are important,
yeah,
to the team, to ourselves. I mean, that's a starting point.
right.
And so, what needs to be said that hasn't been said, in this moment, so that you can move forward in a more powerful way.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it is. When you're at the top, especially, it's like you feel like you have to hold all that in, right? I mean,
Yeah,
you can't share your weaknesses and failures with those below you.
yeah,
That's in the sense, but you're right. We have to be able to be honest with the things we're struggling with. So,
yeah.
okay, okay, Tony. Well, that's some great advice. And if somebody listening to the podcast would like to get a hold of you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Well, the best way to reach out to me is at my website, which is ipurposepartners.com. And if you go there, you'll find my books, my assessments, all types of fun things. And that's the best place to find me. And then the other place would be on LinkedIn. Just look for my name, and the instead of the I at the end, there's a one. So you'll look for my
Okay.
name.
Okay, well, that'll stick out. And again, the I in ipurposepartners.com is just the letter I
Yes.
uh, for Inspired Purpose Partners. So, okay. And we'll put that in the podcast notes as well so people can click on that and get a hold of you in a
Yes.
convenient way. So, thanks again, Tony, for spending some time with me and our audience on Leaders of Lasting Impact. I just want to thank our audience for listening in, and we hope that you'll join us for our next episode. In the meantime, we wish everybody a prosperous year. Bye now.
Thank you.